Wow, this is the how it happened video. So how did it happen? By accident. Pure accident. So I would say I'd read my fair share of articles about digital nomads and that world, and I wondered the same things other people did. How did they do it? How long did they go to places for? How did they afford it? What's life like? And I hadn't specifically thought about being one. I mean, the idea appealed. The idea is very attractive. Just being able to move around and experience the world and that kind of thing. So maybe that was in the back of my mind. I'm not really sure. But the events were a little more specific to this story as to how it accidentally happened. So quick snapshot of life. I'm Australian born and raised. Culturally not very Australian, but that's another discussion. And I lived there for 4 decades of my life. That was where I was home. And in fact, I even did some property development on the family home. So like to build townhouses. So I literally lived in the same location for decades and decades. And then out of the blue, in pursuit of a creative career, I haven't got off the ground at this point still. I went to London, and at this point I'd got my Irish passport as well, so it's a significant part of my ability to do what I'm doing and where I'm doing it, so that's a key thing to know. And my grandfather was Irish, so I was able to apply, get the paperwork, and I actually did it I'd done it quite a few years before I used it for a number of reasons. At the time, you couldn't, if you moved as an Irish person to Australia, you could get Australian citizenship and hold dual, but you couldn't do the opposite. It was something in the Australian laws, and it apparently affected a lot of people who worked for NASA. Like, they would recruit scientists from Oz, and then they didn't probably realise that they had lost their Australian citizenship when they applied for foreign citizenship. So if you got married to someone and it happened because you got married, like, that didn't mean you lost it. Anyway, they removed it. They removed the inequality of laws, and so you could hold dual citizenship. You could apply for other citizenships as an Australian. And so I got it then, but I hadn't really done anything with it. And I was at a conference, and it was suggested that I go to an event in London to pursue the creative career. And I thought, okay, I'll go, get a return ticket, see what happens. And I'd passed through London before, but I'd never really kind of stopped for any length of time, a couple of days, but and it ended up kind of being my liberation from some issues with family and life. And I stayed for 7 years. And then for most of the time I was there for 6 years, I also lived in the same place for a long time. So I'm someone who nests. I literally like nesting and living in a place, and putting down roots. And so this would seem completely at odds with my personality. And if it wasn't for the drive to do something in particular, it probably would be. Anyway, so, and like my personal situation. So I think it takes a few things. If you're looking for somewhere to live somewhere else, that's a part of it. And if you find that you can't be where you were, it's not home anymore, it's not home for whatever reasons, and you don't fit. And then if you're kind of on a drive to find something in particular that you call home, and those parameters you could define, I think they're the 3 things that kind of go into it. But anyway, so it was December 2020, and I had worked remotely for the best part of that year, as most of us did with the pandemic, and I got a job in Germany, and they wanted me to move. So with the Irish passport, I can live in the UK and anywhere in Europe. And I went, okay. So I moved to Berlin. It was probably the most unusual time to live there because it was quieter than it probably is in a general time. And I don't really like busy cities anymore. So I think maybe even if I'd tried to stay, it probably wouldn't have worked out. But a few things weren't exactly what I was looking for, the job, and I think culturally it wasn't the right fit for me. Taxation's a whole other discussion about Germany. It's there's a lot. Let's just say that. So I was like, okay. So when I left the job, I kind of had to make a decision, and it didn't make sense to stay in Germany because it was going to be expensive to be staying somewhere I didn't necessarily plan to live. So I packed my stuff up, left it with some friends, and headed off and went to Portugal because I thought I was going to set my life up there. And then I found Portugal wasn't really what I was looking for either. I did a fair bit of travel in Portugal. I think I was there about 7 or 8 weeks, different parts of the country. So I was now at a point where I'd been able to pick up contracts remotely. I was kind of booking things online, and I was just making it up as I went along, and a month here, a month there, and just moving and sort of going, oh, maybe I'll go too. And it really wasn't that well organised. Most nomads I've read about seem to do 6 months or a year somewhere. I was considering my taxation status in most places, so looking for under that, but also I didn't really know where I wanted to be. And the irony of it was when they moved me over from Germany, I actually lived in a hotel for almost 3 months then, and I kind of got used to it. That hotel and a lot of the ones I've had a kitchen. So there's an element of you living like you're normally living. You just live in a hotel where you don't have the separate costs and things are taken care of. It's all in one bundle kind of thing. So it just kind of kept going. So I left for Portugal May 31st, 2021, and I just kept going. So I've been a lot of places, which I'll share in videos and insights and what I've learnt and what I wish I knew and all that kind of stuff. But it just happened really accidentally, and I kept going. So I kept being able to do remote contracts, which is the preference. And it's a preference for a whole lot of other reasons. Another video maybe. But it's doable. So I tend to live in hotels. I get kitchens in most of them, particularly if I'm in the middle of a contract. And sometimes I do some sightseeing. Sometimes I just get tired and I want to just stay where it is. And there's different places I've been back and forward through that I really like. But how it happened was completely by accident. I just went with it. And now I suppose what I'm looking for is a forever home. But I have a different thing I want to set up now. And I kind of like the idea of potentially setting things up so I have more than one location. And I can just kind of, which I've sort of done now, fly north for the summer and south for the winter. At this point, it's all been European based. I haven't gone further afield and looked into nomad visas and that kind of thing. It's not an issue. Anywhere I stay for under 6 months in the European Union, I'm a non-resident and a non-tax resident. So it's just a matter of, where I want to go, where I want to be. I found, which can be a separate issue, the two most difficult months to determine where to be is actually July, August, because they're busy travel months, they're expensive months all over Europe, and I'm really trying to get away from the heat. Kind of like it around 19, 20, 22 kind of maximum, because I don't want it too hot or too cold if I can do it, so I've got older. But so it's accidental. I'd recommend it for a little while, just being a little bit nomadic. There's a lot of things you learn, a lot of the things you learn about yourself and what you want to do. The world's an interesting place, and Europe's fascinating. Every country's, different. People are wonderful, and people can be buttheads. It's that whole mix of the experience you'd have everywhere else. It's not for everybody, I know, but in my case, not having... for me, there's a few things that contribute to making it a little bit easier, I think, than it would be for other people, which is I don't have strong family ties. A whole other video series, that one, but I just don't. So it means that I don't have that pull to go back to Australia, although my best friend in the world is there. I have people that are important to me all over the place. So there are probably disproportionate number of people in the UK now because of the 7 years. But a lot of them are not from the UK. Some of them, like, I don't know if it's about 50-50 split, I haven't worked it out, but some are from the UK, some have made their home in the UK. As I said, my best friend and another friend are in Oz that I've had longer term friendships with. There's a really good friend in Canada who I met in Barbados. So there are people kind of a little bit all over the place. I've met people recently on tours. One's in the US, one's in the UK, but again, she's not from there. It's a constantly evolving landscape because you don't have that permanency. So kind of buying things, I don't really have anywhere to store them. I don't really do that because I don't really know when I'm going to, settle down. But when I do settle down, also part of the plan is to get assets rather than liabilities. People buy a house and then you're paying it off, which is not really the plan. It's more to have something, if I bought a house bought land that's got a house and can have a tiny house or a granny flat, I might rent the house and live in the tiny house for part of the year and come back and forward, and then I have a place, but also it's a bit separate. So part of the plan would be I thought about getting an apartment somewhere, but you have costs and such related. There's a whole lot of different options and different reasons, but not having found that right location or how it'll just sit precisely the way it would work for me, it hasn't kind of made sense. And each jurisdiction has very different tax regulations. Some you will become a resident by buying property, others you can, but you don't necessarily become a tax resident. It's and in this day and age, a lot of the things I need to take into account are fires, floods, political movements. So it's worth taking into account a lot of factors, a lot of other factors that you might not, because most people choose home where they feel connected. And when you've been nomadic for a while, or you don't have the traditional ties, you're not in a place for a job or a person or something, or people, you just tend to be trying to connect for different reasons. And granted, connection's key, but as an introvert, it's actually easier for me to it's really actually easier for me to just live the way I do and connect with people when I can. So yeah, and look, there are lots of other options if you need to be connecting more with people and out and about and just not kind of hiding. So yes, how it happened, pure accident. If you had said to me 5 years ago, you'd be sitting where you are now doing what you're doing, I'd have probably said, which pill did you take and which matrix are you living in? I can never remember if it's the red pill or the blue pill. I don't even know if they're the colours, but I would have said you were crazy, you were nuts. And, do you know I love having too many books and this and that and all sorts of things. So it's a journey, and it's a journey that I'm going to share here because, well, I don't want to forget, because when I settle down, I think it's easy to. And maybe it will help somebody who's thinking about it learn something, laugh at some of the stories, see the irony that is our lives.